Hmm? Is it still upside down?
Welcome, A Tale of Two Trials that we're going to be talking about today. On the left side, you see the current defendant, Zoe Rosenberg, who faces up to a half a decade behind bars. And on the right, you see Wayne Hsiung, who did time. Both of them are fighting for the right to rescue animals trapped in industrialized animal agriculture, where, for example, 140,000 chickens are killed every minute on this planet. We've got breaking news for you. This is day 10 of the chicken rescue trial of Zoe Rosenberg, and they're hoping to have a jury seated by the end of the day. We'll see, because this is the 10th day of this trial and still no jury. A lot of shenanigans going on that front. Let's hear from the defendant herself, Zoe Rosenberg, describe her impressions of what is happening with this case as the jury comes together, hopefully seated by the end of the day, and opening statements on Monday.
Why are the prosecutors so concerned about whether or not I care about how animals are treated? Going to continue voir dire with the potential jurors. One thing I wasn't expecting is that the prosecutors are actually trying to precondition the jurors to be receptive to their case. And so they're asking like leading questions with hypotheticals that kind of hint at facts of the case, trying to paint this narrative that is not favorable to me. So don't love that, but we're going to head to court now. So we used 4 of our preemptory strikes today, and the prosecutors used 1 of theirs. They're kind of trying to weed out people who might have issues with large industrial animal agriculture operations, or might, be particularly concerned about animal welfare, how animals are treated. But on the bright side, maybe that raises some eyebrows if jurors are wondering, hey, why are the prosecutors so concerned about whether or not I care about how animals are treated? How is that relevant to their ability to prove their case?
All right. So we're going to get to A Tale of Two Trials in a second, because both of these cases went down and are going down in the same courthouse in Sonoma County, California, about 55 miles north of San Francisco. We're going to go straight out to Matthew Zirbel, who is our reporter on scene. Now, I know, Matthew, you try to stay as far away as you can from any jurors so that nobody could ever accuse us of, in any way, shape, or form, influencing the jurors. Oh, can you bring us up to date? There is hope, I guess, that a jury will be seated by the end of today.
Yeah, we're hopeful. Court moves very slowly. We're only starting at 1:30 and going until 5, and have been every day this week. But the process is moving. I think we've gotten through one set of jurors. They bring them in large sets and then go through each juror in the set. The judge, then prosecution, then defense will go through them. I'm about as far as you can get from the building while still being able to see it. I think a lot of the people trickling in are jurors. It's hard to know for sure. We've got a couple supporters gathering outside. Of course, we can't be talking anything about the case in the potential range of a juror. That's why I'm here in a kind of grassy park area outside of it.
Do you see any other reporters there from any other news organizations?
Not currently. We have seen a couple of reporters come in. I haven't talked to them, so I don't know where they're from, and stop by for a day or two of trial. We haven't seen much persistent coverage or much coverage yet.
Now, Matthew, you were there when Wayne Hsiung was put on trial back in 2023. And we're kind of looking at today A Tale of Two Trials, because there's been some pretty dramatic developments with Wayne Hsiung. It was back in 2023 that he was convicted and tried in this very same courthouse that Zoe Rosenberg is being tried in now. And he actually did time. He did not that much time, but hey, I've been a reporter for many years, and even one evening that I spent behind bars was traumatizing. But when he got out after serving time, after being convicted in the very courthouse Matthew is standing in front of, he did not say, oh, this stopped me. In fact, he took his activism to Wisconsin and began investigating a notorious laboratory breeding facility for beagles. And now he's going to tell you, this just came out, this is breaking news, dramatic developments, because at first the same thing happened. The authorities put him on trial, and he still didn't let that stop him. This is in Wisconsin. And just last night, there was breaking news, and he's going to address it right now. So let's hear some breaking news from Wayne Hsiung, who is the co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere, which is the organization that Zoe Rosenberg works for as an animal cruelty investigator. So this guy is sort of the leader of the open rescue movement, saying, yes, you have a right, a moral right, a moral responsibility to go in there and rescue animals who are suffering in factory farms, or in the case in Wisconsin, in a laboratory breeding facility for beagles. Let's hear what just happened.
The chief veterinarian at one of the largest and most notorious animal abusing facilities in the nation just got suspended. Back in 2017, I and a team of activists went inside to expose what was happening inside. We found hundreds of dogs trapped in cages with injuries and diseases and wounds, and many dogs spinning psychotically because they had never stepped outside of a 2-foot by 4-foot cage. And we took one of these beagles named Julie, who was blind, to the veterinarian, but instead of charging the company, despite the fact that we had evidence of multiple crimes committed by this facility, they charged us with crimes. And in March 2024, we went on trial. But the charges were dismissed against us, and we turned the tables on the industry. We filed what's called a special prosecutor petition, arguing that the local government had been asleep at the wheel, was not upholding the rule of law, and the court needed to appoint an independent special prosecutor, independent investigators, to determine if the company committed crimes. Now, back in January of 2025, the court ruled in our favor, but to date, there has been no accountability. Until now, the special prosecutor who had been appointed was dragging his feet. It looked like the local authorities were dragging their feet. And until just a few weeks ago, when the Dane County Board of Supervisors issued a resolution saying, all these dogs got to get out of here, I was genuinely worried that once again, nothing would happen. Now things have changed. The veterinarian has been suspended, and this is a big deal. I'm confident this is part of a greater moral awakening around animal rights, and you all are part of that. It's not that you can be part of it. Just by watching this video and engaging with this content, you are part of it.
And that's why I say, share out this video, be a part of history. They may look back in 75 or 100 years the way certain incredible moments in the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement are now looked at, and say that was a moment in history. And I believe this trial and the whole series of trials to try to shut down animal activists is a part of history. So let's talk a little bit. Lindsay Baker, you were the first to alert me. Oh my gosh, there's a victory. Wayne Hsiung, after being prosecuted repeatedly, after being put in jail, after being arrested again, finally a breakthrough in that the veterinarian at this notorious facility, we invite them on anytime, has been suspended. And the Board of Supervisors in that area is saying, let's get all those dogs out of there. What's the big picture? Let's do round robin. What's the big picture, Lindsay?
Well, I think the big picture is that people and the public is finally becoming more aware, as well as the politicians, as well as other people that are in charge of overseeing these organizations or giving this work to certain labs for testing, et cetera, or overseeing how, the government purchases meat from these different poultry providers, et cetera. I think the big picture is, as the public wakes up, all of the other organizations are getting pressured to also look into it. And as they do, it's being shaken up, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah, thank you. And, I want to go to Justine Block. You're an attorney. From a legal standpoint, the fact that that in Wisconsin, they've gone all the way from prosecuting Wayne for going in there and showing the conditions to now basically agreeing with them, suspending the veterinarian who, by the way, was accused of allowing non-vets to do extremely painful surgery on these dogs without anesthesia, not just once, but over a period of more than a decade. and he's invited on anytime, as well as the Board of Supervisors saying, let's get these dogs out of here while this investigation proceeds. Are we seeing a cultural change and a legal change in real time, Justine?
Thanks, Jane. I think this is a terrific victory to report. And I do see this as a successful legal tactic and showing a shift in cultural change. For Wayne to be successful and getting a special prosecutor appointed for this situation is huge. Even though he said the prosecutor dragged their feet, now there's a win. And I think an important part of this tactic that now could be incorporated into our playbook on the animal rights legal front is allying with local government. I think it's very key that Wayne was able to urge the local county board of supervisors to pass a resolution calling for the revocation of this animal testing facility's license and to investigate the veterinarian. And for now, the veterinarian to be suspended, as I understand, is a big part of this, to look into the professional licensing, to ally with local governments, and to get the special prosecutor appointed. Those are three really important aspects of this tactic that we can use in our playbook.
And I think what Wayne was trying to say is that with this breaking news of his victory in Wisconsin, that he has finally been able to flip the script. And that's exactly what obviously Zoe Rosenberg is trying to do with her trial, willing to go to jail for almost half a decade in order to flip that script and put animal agriculture on trial. Tiffany, you were nodding your head. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I just want to say too that every article and almost every single news clip that's been following this Ridgeland Farms, from beginning to prosecute Wayne and Eva and Paul, all the way up to now, they show the video and photos that Wayne took in what some people would call an illegal entry, which was actually a rescue of 3 beagles. Those photos have changed public opinion and now have changed those photos have helped expose this. If they hadn't gone in, I think this is maybe the first time that folks ever saw what's actually going on in the facility. So those photos were able to flip the script. So I think
you're right. A picture tells 1,000 words, and it's always been that way. That's why Direct Action Everywhere and Zoe Rosenberg say they're really trying to limit the video of what happens inside these industrial animal agriculture facilities. I want to go out to Matthew because you were there for the trial of Wayne Hsiung at that very same courthouse in 2023. In fact, Zoe was arrested on the very day that Wayne was basically sentenced. And as Wayne was being taken to jail to do his time, Zoe was trying to once again deliver information that she says shows criminal animal cruelty inside these industrialized animal agriculture facilities and slaughterhouses. And she was arrested on the very day, just minutes after Wayne was taken and told to start his sentence. He was immediately remanded behind bars, and then she, in short order, was arrested. So there is a very real connection between these two cases. You know, I just watched a documentary called The World Wars that make a very strong case that World War I and World War II are really part of one big war. It's a fascinating documentary. And in the same way, I think Wayne Hsiung's trial and conviction and Zoe Rosenberg's trial in the same courthouse, and we don't know what's going to happen. She could be acquitted, but it's part of a greater continuum. And Matthew, do you see it that way?
I definitely do. Every rescue is an opportunity for some change to happen in the culture. I think it's very after the Ridgeland case, for example, was dropped, is when real change started to happen with the special prosecutor. And there's still a big potential that Trader Joe's, the current campaign is to ask Trader Joe's to drop Petaluma Poultry, which is the place that Zoe did her investigation. And depending on how the trial goes, that can inform how places see the likelihood of change happening, the understanding of what is going on inside of the facilities. And so there's a continuance there. And more directly from Wayne's trial in Sonoma, there's a continuance. Zoe was arrested right after the verdict. And I think that that's important because it indicates that there was probably a decision being made inside of whoever decided ultimately to make the decision, likely the DA, to arrest Zoe on the basis of Wayne actually being convicted, which means that the outcome for Zoe could determine how the DA and how Sonoma County decides to treat animal rescuers in the future as well.
So you're raising a very interesting question. And by the way, this is footage released by Direct Action Everywhere itself of Zoe rescuing the 4 chickens for which she is charged with conspiracy, felony conspiracy, and then misdemeanor trespass and tampering with a vehicle. And what's really interesting is that both Wayne and Zoe face very similar charges. Wayne was convicted of conspiracy and trespass, and Zoe is facing conspiracy and trespass. Notably missing is the charge of theft. There she is taking these 4 chickens. She's saying she's rescuing them. She's going to make a very strong case, she hopes, in court that they were ill. And yet she's not charged with theft. And I think you're looking live at the courthouse there. I think one of the reasons she's not charged with theft is that in a previous case, a very similar case involving former Baywatch actress Alexandra Paul. Here is Alexandra Paul and her co-defendant Alicia Santurio rescuing 2 chickens. They were charged with theft, and that did open the door to an intense investigation into the conditions of the birds that they took, which they were able to argue in court were sick. And they were able to show court documents that they were sick. And indeed, Alexandra Paul, who testified, was found not guilty. And let's listen to her testimony to get a sense of what prosecutors looking at that acquittal, and that was in another county, Merced County, but they looked at that acquittal of former Baywatch star Alexandra Paul, and they said, let's not do that again. Let's not charge him with theft, because then they get to go on and on about the condition of the birds. Let's just charge him with conspiracy. And that's exactly what they're doing with both. They did it with Wayne and they're doing it with Zoe. So let's listen to Alexandra Paul testify in her own defense in court.
Open rescue is going into facilities where there's animal abuse and documenting that animal abuse and rescuing the animals who need medical care. And that's the rescue part. And then the open part is that we don't cover our faces. We are completely transparent about what we're doing, because that's an important ethic to us, and because the companies that we're investigating are not transparent. And also because we believe that what we're doing is legal and right.
So she was acquitted. So Justine, as an attorney, there's been a lot of speculation that the prosecutors saw that, wow, first of all, it's harder to convict a celebrity. I will say that, having covered many celebrity trials. Michael Jackson, everybody thought that was an open shut case. He was acquitted on all counts. It's much harder to convict a celebrity. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it is a phenomenon. But secondly, do you agree with people who say, well, the prosecution looked at that case, saw that it was caught on camera that they took the chickens, and nevertheless, they acquitted them? because they were charged with theft, and that opened the door to discussing in depth the condition of the animals. And that's why they're not charging Zoe with theft. That's why they didn't charge Wayne with theft, that they're doing this conspiracy, which they think is going to be more effective.
Exactly, Jane. I do think that is their strategy. If we look at the situation with Wayne's conviction, the charges are the same as far as the felony conspiracy and the trespass charges for Zoe's case. We talked about at the beginning, on the first day, as I recall in the panel, about the $24 value of the chickens and that the theft charge was dropped. So I think that's one reason the theft charge was dropped, so that the prosecution would not be going down that road, opening the door to the value of the chickens. And so, because that was not an effective strategy in the case you mentioned, it was not effective for the prosecution in the Smithfield case, as I recall, where Wayne and his co-defendant were acquitted for the theft of the pigs in that case. And a big reason for that was because of not being able to value the pigs because they were so sick and injured. So that was a factor, I believe, in their acquittal. So for this Sonoma County prosecutor in Zoe's case, they're going for a playbook on their side that worked for convicting Wayne on the felony conspiracy and trespassing charge in his trial. I think it was 2023, and now he is appealing those convictions. He had appealed on the necessity defense, that he wasn't allowed to raise the necessity defense, and you'll see another similarity here in Zoe's trial, that the judge determined she wouldn't be allowed to raise the necessity defense. So it will be very interesting to see how this plays out on appeal. We are all watching Wayne's appeal very closely about the necessity defense and how effective is the prosecutor's strategy in that case. So that will definitely, we'll have to see how that plays out. That'll be something to watch.
And, you know, the greater story here to me, when I was listening to Wayne with that breaking news, is that he and the other members of Direct Action Everywhere are what I would call relentless. Convictions don't stop them. And I want to just show a little bit of the case in Wisconsin that now Wayne has had a major victory on. This is sort of the battleground. You can see there are local people who have joined him and local organizations like Dane for Dogs. It's happening in Dane County. And here's just one image of one of the dogs that he videotaped when he went into that facility. And again, he was initially arrested and charged with going into the facility, and now he has managed to flip the script and gotten some victories there with the suspension of the veterinarian, as well as the local board of supervisors calling for all those dogs to be pulled out as the investigation continues by a special prosecutor. Just the idea that they got a special prosecutor appointed. So the question is, could any of that ever happen in Sonoma County? Could the script be flipped in Sonoma County, which is very, very intent on prosecuting Wayne? They did. Now they're prosecuting Zoe. So while this case drags on, again, it's day 10, and it is hoped that a jury will be seated by the end of the day. In 6 minutes, I know Matthew's got to go into court. In 6 minutes, the jury selection process will continue. Before we let Matthew go into court, do you have any other thoughts on this whole conspiracy angle? Because to me, I find it very strange that somebody is charged with conspiracy connected to misdemeanors. So conspiracy is a felony, and this is what they did in Wayne's case too. And yet somehow it's connected to misdemeanor trespass. What are your thoughts? And you just disappeared, so we'll see if you come back. We love to get Matthew's thoughts before he goes in on that. Are you, he may be leaving because he might have seen some, he might have seen some jurors, and it's very important to not be around jurors when they go by. So he's a very smart guy. He probably just ducked out of the way to make sure that no jurors see him. We're going to move on. Go ahead. You had thoughts on that, Justine? Go ahead.
I do. Thanks, Jane. I just want to address the elements that the prosecutor would have to prove for the conspiracy under California Penal Code Section 182, which requires the prosecutor to prove that the defendant intentionally entered into an agreement with another person or persons to commit a crime, and the defendant committed an overt act in furtherance of this agreement. Finally, the overt act was committed in California. So those are the elements that the prosecution's going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember, the burden's on the prosecution.
All right. Well, we've got Matthew back on the stage. Your final words before you go into court. Not final words, but your thoughts for today before you go in.
Yeah, sorry, you're breaking up for a moment there, but it looks like we're back. It'll be interesting to see what happens next with jury selection. The jury ultimately, of course, is the one that makes the verdict. And so getting a good jury is very pivotal. Of course, the evidence that the jury is able to see is just as important. But it really will be interesting to see what the attitudes of the jury will be, and if we can glean any information about what the likelihood of winning the case is from that.
And as you go in, just make note on some of the questions the prosecution asked, because I was very interested to note that Zoe Rosenberg, the defendant, was saying on social media, and we played it, that they're trying to sort of prep the jury, and their questions are kind of like asking, this is according to her, whether the juror is compassionate to animals. Like, should that be grounds for being thrown off a case? I mean, that's something that we would like society to be, compassionate to animals. So I'll let you get in there. Thank you for joining us, Matthew, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Could report back tomorrow on it.
At that point. Thank you very much. All right. So one of the things that I want to talk about now is the work that Tiffany Brunelli, former law enforcement investigator turned Direct Action Everywhere member, has been engaged in this weekend and yesterday when the trial was dark. Remember, the trial is dark every Wednesday, but the members of DXC don't call it a day and say, I'm going to take a day off and sit in a hot tub. They double down on their activism. So in a way, the longer the trial drags out, the more activism the people in that community are exposed to. But it's also grown beyond just Northern California. Here in Los Angeles, Tiffany, who you're looking at there on the lower right, led a group that, well, you're going to have to see for yourself because it's pretty amazing. All I can tell you, it's one of the largest freeways in the United States, the 10 freeway, and they did banner drops, not one banner drop, but 6 banner drops yesterday. All right, Tiffany, take it away. Tell us why you did this and how it was done. And yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, we had a great turnout yesterday, and the Los Angeles lead organizer, Sally Zito, she came up with this idea, and she did her research, and she found that there's 6 heading 10 east or 10 west. Actually, there's 6 freeway overpasses. We needed 6. So we had the 5 points or 5 rights, the animal bill rights, and then the Rose's Law, how to get to the web page, and the UR code. And we made these 16-foot banners. And through Sally's research, we found out that if we went during peak traffic hours, which I believe is from like 4:30 to 6, we have the potential to reach 50,000 folks. Jane, 50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so each banner had one of the 5 points or one of the 5 rights of Rose's Law. And we actually did them. It started with the 5th right, and then we went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So people actually, if they're looking up, they kind of have to think about it. But the rights, you have them there, but they're freedom from ownership. And in my house with my 2 kitties and dog, that's how that goes. They own me. Freedom from abuse and killing. Number 3, legal protection of their interest. And a right, number 4, right to safe home and habitat. And number 5, right to be rescued from disease and exploitation. And that's what what Zoe's trial is about. It's about the right to rescue animals that are in life-threatening diseases and exploitation. And Rose's Law came about, I believe, in 2017, when they did a mass rescue at a factory farm up in Sonoma. And I believe they rescued maybe 30-something very sick and diseased chickens. And when the authorities came, who you think would normally be interested in helping the rescuers, they instead confiscated all of these chickens and they were eventually euthanized, except for one, which Zoe named Rose. And she was her legs, she had leg problems because her weight was so heavy, because she's bred to be where she can barely stand on her legs. And I think you had some video of Zoe. She took her around for a couple of years until
As a matter of fact, we have Zoe explaining the entire development of how Rose's Law came to be. And remember, and I just want to show you that the defendant, Zoe Rosenberg, runs a farmed animal sanctuary. So imagine her stress. She's had illness from childhood, type 1 diabetes. That's why she's wearing some medical equipment attached to her face during the trial. And she's also got an entire sanctuary that she runs along with her mother. So she's got that, but that's a lot of stress. Now, despite all that, she has remained just like Wayne Hsiung. These people define relentlessness, which is why Wayne was able to flip the script ultimately. Had he just given up and said, oh, they dropped the charges against me, I'm just going to go home and count my lucky blessings, we wouldn't have the breaking news we had today. The same thing for Zoe Rosenberg. Here she is describing how Rose's Law, the right to rescue, got started.
About 5 years ago, animal rescuers went to a factory farm. This applies to Petaluma poultry, and tried to rescue chickens who were dying on the floor of this factory farm. And the animal rescuers called the police because they were hoping that the police would come and try to help the animals and address the criminal animal cruelty. And the police did show up, but they decided, instead of helping the animals, that they were going to protect corporate interest. And they actually tore those chickens out of the arms of animal rescuers, and law enforcement killed all of them. All but one. One chicken was allowed to go past police lines. One chicken was allowed to go to the vet and get care and spend her life at sanctuary. And that chicken was Rose. Rose was brought to me, and she was severely debilitated. She was really sick. The first night that she was with me, she was so scared. I remember I had her in my bedroom in case she needed anything. And when I turned the lights out, she started crying, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I didn't know if she was in pain. I just didn't know why she was so upset. She just wouldn't stop crying. And finally, I wrapped her in a blanket, and I brought her up onto my bed, and then she fell asleep. She stopped crying, and I realized she just didn't want to be alone. And from that day forward, she slept in my bed every night. She went with me everywhere. She came with me to the grocery store, to restaurants, even sometimes to school. And About a year after she was rescued, she passed away very suddenly. She had never really fully regained her health. She never regained use of one of her legs. And I've spent the last 4 years grieving Rose. After Rose's death, her story inspired a mass movement for animals, a movement for Rose's law, a law that would give animals a Bill of Rights. And the first one of those rights is the right to be rescued.
Wow. So that is so moving. And that is the kind of story, Justine, I assume that obviously Zoe would love to tell the jury. How does it work? I mean, we've seen a lot of battles over evidence. One of the reasons why it's day 10 and we still haven't officially seated a jury, hopefully it's going to happen by the end of today, and then more arguments tomorrow, and then Monday opening statements. But one of the reasons why is that the prosecution really doesn't want those sympathetic tear-jerk stories to be within earshot of the jury. Justine.
Right. I'm sure that's not what the prosecutor does not want the jury to hear, what we just heard. But it really remains to be seen. We don't know yet whether Zoe's taking the stand. We still have to make sure, hopefully there will be a fair, impartial jury selected soon. I think that is one really challenging aspect of this case, is that the venue is in Sonoma County, the same venue that Wayne was, where he was convicted of the similar charges. And so the important thing is to see that that she gets a fair trial.
That's the question. Can she get a fair trial? Right now, as you mentioned, Wayne Hsiung is appealing his conviction, saying he didn't get a fair trial, that he wasn't allowed to explain his motivations, that the fact that they wouldn't let him argue the necessity defense was basically depriving him of the right to a fair trial. And the necessity defense is based on the idea that you can commit a small infraction if you are saving a life, if you are doing the greater good. And the ultimate example is if you're walking down the street and you look over and you see on private property there's a kid drowning in a pool, you don't worry about the trespass at that moment. You go in and you rescue the trial. And the judge in that case, as well as the judge in Zoe's case, said the necessity defense doesn't apply to animals. But one of the things that all of these folks who are involved in these cases point out is that, yes, you want an acquittal, but it's actually the convictions that sometimes move the law forward. And that if, for example, he were to win on appeal and the appeals court were to say, you know what, the necessity defense does apply to all sentient beings, there's no restriction, then that would actually achieve more than just an acquittal. So this is a very high stakes game. You're smiling, Tiffany. What are your thoughts there?
I just think that would be so exciting if it would actually change. It would be history making. It would change the law books if we gave animals, sentient beings, the same rights as humans. It would change everything. So that would be a very exciting outcome.
Mike Schroeder says, believe me, she will prevail, and she will, and all the animals will win too. The reason that I was so excited about bringing in Wayne Hsiung's recent victory in the Wisconsin laboratory beagle breeding facility case is that, come on, a year ago, nobody thought that was going to happen. I mean, Unchained TV was the pool camera. And, as this trial progresses, we'll revisit that case and show you. But we were the pool camera in court. And Wayne, who is an attorney, along with being the co-founder of DXC, was in there at the legal bench making some arguments. But part of it is to have faith, okay, that change can occur, Lindsay Baker, because if you had looked at the Wisconsin case a couple of years ago, you'd say, well, Wayne should be thanking his lucky stars that he wasn't convicted, he was charged, but they dismissed the charges, that he wasn't thrown in the clink for going in there and documenting what was going on with these dogs. And now he has truly flipped the script, and he has the local community behind him, and the county board of supervisors, and this veterinary board that yanked the license of the vet in charge of this facility, which we invite all of them on anytime. So, big picture, you never know what the outcome's going to be, Lindsay.
Right. And like you said, regardless of the outcome, this group is relentless. They are not going to stop. And it's just a matter of time till all of this comes out into the open, more and more public awareness. We're talking about dogs here. And some of the atrocities, tests where they're slicing their eyelids, for what could that possibly, what type of, I couldn't even imagine what type of test that would benefit anyone. I mean,
it wasn't a test. It was what they do to these dogs who are locked up behind these bars. And we have video. We decided not to disturb you today, but there's video of all these dogs, hundreds and hundreds of them trying to bark. Many of them have had their vocal cords removed. That was another thing that allegedly was done at this facility, which we invite on anytime, without pain relief. Imagine being devocalized without pain relief, your teeth removed without pain relief, and eye surgeries. These were all done as part of just, the process of keeping these dogs there. So, I just think that Karen LaCava, who's watching, is making a point. Yes, but they're dogs. That's part of the problem, is that in the case of Zoe Rosenberg, she is thinking about chickens, and chickens have been very demonized in our society, treated less than garbage. I'll never forget, I was backing up on a street and I hit a garbage can, and I went to see if there was any damage. And I saw that somebody had dumped a whole bunch of chicken, from the supermarket, uneaten, into the garbage. And I thought, we treat these animals less than garbage. We don't even regard them as animals. And one thing I want to say before we wrap up today that occurred to me this weekend, because the powers that be and the companies involved, let me actually quote some of the companies here. And again, we invite them on anytime. We would love to dialogue with them. We would love to have them on our show and talk to them. But what I want to show is that, for example, the Purdue company, which is the company where Zoe Rosenberg went into one of their facilities and took the 4 chickens, they describe, first of all, they deny all allegations of animal cruelty. They say they give birds space to roam, access to the outdoors, and they say that the group that is claiming extreme animal cruelty is an extreme group with the ultimate goal of ending animal agriculture altogether and imposing a radical agenda that would threaten the livelihoods of Sonoma County farmers. To me, this is the most essential cultural tug of war. What defines a radical agenda? What defines extremism? I keep going back to this because I saw this incredible docuseries about life in Victorian England, where on the East End of London, people were living in filth and working. They had come from the country into the city to get jobs at these mills, and there was no housing for them, no sanitation for them, no nothing, and they're living in filth. And children are working sometimes 12-hour days. And there were people at that time that went in and said, this is wrong. Children should not be working, period. And do you know what? They were accused of being radicals, extremists with a radical agenda. And so ultimately the laws were modified to limit the number of hours that children were allowed to work. But make no mistake, the powers that be were regarding the people who may have even got into some of these mills and taken children out, children who were working 12 or maybe even 14-hour days, 7 days a week, the people who were saying children should not be allowed to work in the workforce were called extremists with a radical agenda. And let's just get some round robin on that before we wrap it up today.
Can I just say that it's
go ahead,
radical when you have a new idea that goes up against what is the norm or what is thought as the norm, and then fear tactics are also used by the opposition, like it's going to affect the food source. Where are we going to get our food? And, you know, other things like that, everyone's a radical, but within a short period of time, all that controversy, and that's what we're seeing here, the controversy that this court case is providing is actually benefiting the animal rights people. And that's the good story. No matter what, we win, and we will win. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. And unfortunately, the animals are suffering. These people that are putting their lives on the line are suffering. And the rest of us really have to help. So please, please, please share.
I agree with you. Anytime I say, oh my God, it's day 10, because just to get you behind the curtain for a second, we don't just pop on. There's a lot of work that goes into scheduling each and every one of these live interviews. There's a script, there's poster art, there's code that has to be written. And anytime I get a little tired, I think, well, wait a second. If there's a woman who's risking going to prison for 5 years, I can get it together to do all that work. And that's why we at Unchained TV have made a commitment to go live every single day of this trial. We're going to be back tomorrow, and then we're going to be full steam ahead Monday when opening arguments are expected. Final thoughts, Justine.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate all the work that you do on the show. I'm happy to participate on the panel. And thank you to the reporter too on the ground, Matthew, and everyone else involved. I appreciate all the work. I do want to just say, in terms of the legal framework, as I recall historically, animal cruelty laws passed before women's rights, before child labor laws. So there is a cultural awareness of the cruelty against animals, particularly in the labs. You brought up the distinction earlier between the dogs, the atrocities that are going on with these dogs. I think people are going to be really sympathetic. On the other hand, when you're talking about chickens raised for human consumption, then all of a sudden that cognitive dissonance kicks in that we've talked about on earlier panels, on earlier days of your coverage. Is there's a difference under the law too, where under the Animal Welfare Act, the farm animals are not covered. They're not covered. So the Federal Animal Welfare Act doesn't protect chickens or other farm animals. There are federal regulations that deal with the transportation and slaughter of farm animals, but we have our state animal cruelty law. So when DXE and other investigators go into factory farm operations and uncover what they're seeing and release what they're seeing, there's a gray area in the law, because currently there isn't a codified right to rescue under the law. So what does that mean? So Tiffany shared earlier the Roses Law. You covered all of this, Jane, really well about the Roses Law. And one of the last elements of it is the right to be rescued from situations of distress and exploitation. What does that mean? That should be examined a little bit closer. Are we talking about, you could basically say, are we talking about injured? Are we talking about the right to rescue injured and ill and dying animals? Because if you say rescuing distressed and exploited animals, doesn't that apply to the entire ag industry? From our point of view in this movement, we see the suffering of farm animals in factory farms where nearly all of the food comes from. So we have to look at that a little bit closer as far as what are we asking exactly? Are we saying that she has to see how she doesn't take the whole tray? She doesn't take the whole track. She doesn't take the whole tray. She is examining the health of those chickens. And I think what she's saying is that her intent there is to rescue and address the birds that are injured and sick, and she has the vet records to show it.
You're making extremely good legal points, and I think that's why we're so happy to have you as an attorney on with us. All of this is going to be parsed. I will say that there are resolutions, measures that the people of California, which is the fourth largest economy in the world, by the way, okay? California state, LA County alone has more people than 40 states in the United States. So California is a very powerful state. There's no accident that this trial, which is a culture war over industrialized animal agriculture, killing 80 billion plus sentient beings called factory farmed animals every year, the overwhelming majority of them chickens. It's no accident that this is happening here in California. People think California, they think Hollywood, they think the tech industry, but they don't think, wow, the largest dairy state in the nation? Yes, California is the largest dairy state. It's a heavily agricultural area. And anybody who's driven from Los Angeles to San Francisco and beyond knows that, because when you get out of the major cities, you are in an agricultural area. And so that's why this is such an important battle. It is a culture war. And the people of California have passed, for example, Prop 12, which says that animals must have the right to turn around. They must have enough room to turn around and scratch themselves. What kind of a sick species are we that we think that it's okay to keep, for example, pigs, because the proposition primarily applies to pigs, but other animals as well. Look at, these are pig gestation crates, where these pigs, who are smarter than dogs, considered the fifth smartest animal, have no room to turn around and scratch themselves, and they go mad. They go absolutely mad. Well, guess what? If you don't like this, stop eating pork, hot dogs, bacon, etc., because this is what you're supporting. But the people of California overwhelmingly supported Prop 12, which banned these. And right now there's a whole effort. The Supreme Court validated that decision, so the law stands. But right now the meat industry is in Congress trying to come up with other ways to undo that law, because what happens in California applies to the rest of the nation because it's such a large market. And it's saying you can't sell pig products that were produced using pig gestation crates. So they're all up in arms, but the people of California, showing that they're compassionate, said, no, that's barbarism. This is barbarism. When I see this, I'll never forget the first time I saw this, I said, no, people couldn't actually create this on purpose. And it truly made me embarrassed to be a member of the human race. But on the bright side, Prop 12 passed. And that's just an example that there are some laws in California that do address the conditions of farmed animals. So did I give everybody final thoughts? Tiffany, since you were out there all weekend, I'll give you the final thought of the day.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to animal agriculture and corporations calling these DXC investigators that have the nerve to go into these facilities, and including when Wayne went into the dog facility, to when you see these photos, like you talked about the pig gestation crate, what is extreme? What is radical? And then such extent to hide that from the public. Zoe facing 5 years in jail for showing some pictures of what's really going on in there. So just thank you, Jane, again, for covering the trial every day and all the work that you do behind that. And we're going to have more banner drops. DXC Los Angeles can reach out, and hope you'll join us.
All right. And when you have banner drops, we will be covering them here on Unshade TV. We will see you tomorrow. Always remember that you can watch us on the streaming network. You can just download Unchained TV for free on your phone. Watch it online at unchained.tv. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. And just like MSNBC has a viewpoint and Fox News has a viewpoint, we have a viewpoint, but we cover things journalistically, and we appreciate you sharing this out. See you tomorrow.